Welcome to the Indian Trails Public Library's YouTube channel. My name is Morgan, and you can usually find me in the Launchpad. Today we're going to go over how to sew a pleated mask. But before we get started, I ask that you please go down to the description box below for a few disclaimers and further information on these homemade masks. All right, so the supplies we're going to be using today, in addition to thread, a sewing machine, or hand sewing needles, can be done either way, we're going to need 100% cotton. These are cut out at 8.5 by 8 inches, so a smaller rectangle. Definitely go larger if that sounds too small to fit your face. Some people are doing 12 by 10 for adults, and then smaller than 8-inch rectangles for children. If you have any flannel readily available, grab that too. It makes for a great middle piece, which serves as a little bit of a filter. Feel free to use an old cotton t-shirt if you don't have fabric readily available, as that'll work in a pinch. So of course we'll be using some pins, a ruler or measuring tape, fabric scissors. Cutting can be made way easier if you have a cutting mat, a quilting ruler, and a rotary cutter, but these are not necessary. And before I had these, I was just using tailor's chalk to measure the pieces out, and then a pair of scissors. Another easy way to cut out fabric and not have to worry about frayed edges is to use pinking shears, these heavy zigzag looking scissors. So we'll also need some straps for our masks. If you're using elastic, use about 7 to 8 inches or larger, depending on face size. If you don't have elastic laying around, cool, just use strips of fabric or bias tape. Strips of fabric will need to be about 18 inches by 1.75 inches. If you're using bias tape, you would just sew it with a little zigzag stitch and bam, you've got functional straps. Another little hack here is to cut up strips of a cotton jersey t-shirt or kids shorts that you don't need anymore. These work well for straps. It's also a good idea to have a seam ripper on hand, which is always a good tip for sewing. And another thing we'll need is an iron, which comes in handy when making our pleats. To get nice pleats, an iron is a great asset. If you don't have one, you'll be okay. You'll just have to do some folding and holding down, maybe get a heavy pile of books to hold your folded pleats in place before you get to sewing them. Alrighty friends, so that's all we'll be needing today. So if you plan on using the fabric strips to make your straps, stick with me and I'll show you how to make those. Otherwise you can skip ahead a couple minutes and we'll get going on the rest of it. If you are electing to use the 1.75 inches by 18 inch strips, then you will probably want to press them. That'll make it a little bit easier. You can either do it this way where you press it in half and then you press again to enfold the raw edges. What I mean by encasing the raw edges. See, so we've gone ahead and already done that initial half, right? And so now, after it's cooled down just slightly, I'm folding it in half, kind of to meet in the middle, and then I'm pressing it again, which ends up coming out like this. So it's kind of nice and neat once you pin it in place and press it. If you don't want to do that, you can just press it in half again, and then you'll get something that looks kind of like this. So it's not quite as neat, but once you hit it with the zigzag stitch, this is going to be the right side out anyway. So it won't actually matter that much in the end. So whichever way is easier for you, whichever way you prefer to do it, will be totally fine. So what we're going to do now is take our straps and connect them to the rest of the mask. So as you can see, I've got the 3 layers. Right sides together because of course we're going to sew from the inside, leave a little space open, and then fold it right side out at the end. But before we do that, we have to connect the straps that we're using in each corner. So you will have a little bulge in the middle, which is okay. You're just going to want to make sure that they stay out of the way when you are sewing straight across. So what this kind of looks like as I'm doing it, I'm kind of taking one of the flaps out, deciding which corner I want. Doesn't actually matter. I'm just folding it just a little bit so it takes up less bulky space. And then when you get to the corner, you do want to have it go past the corner of the fabric just a bit. That's to ensure that you are legitimately sewing through it all the way. Otherwise, you're going to turn it right side out and it could be a little looser than you want it to be. So I'm just pinning through all of the layers to keep the strap in place. Here we go. You can see it's kind of popping out. And this is okay too. You can see one of our straps is kind of coming out. Totally okay. We're just gonna poke it back in. And if it makes you feel better prior to sewing, you can absolutely just put some extra pins in here to keep the straps out of the way. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. We only have one side left, so I'll go ahead and do that, and then we can get to sewing. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and sew along all of the edges now. We'll be using you can use about 1/4 to 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you wanna go even, thinner than that, that's totally fine. Do whatever makes you feel happy. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get sewing on this and I'll speed it up. Oh, remember, we wanna backstitch on all of the straps. So every time we're going over straps, we're gonna backstitch to reinforce those and make sure that those are nice and secure. Okay, get ready to watch them sewing. Last stretch, y'all. And remember, you're gonna stop so that there's a gap about 2 inches wide or so, just so that we can fold it back, right side out. Okay? Sweet. So I clipped my corners, got all those little itty bitty threads out, and then anything else that would cause extra bulk. And now I'm just pulling it from the inside so that the inside comes out. You'll want to do it kind of gently, but so long as you did the back stitching and the lock stitching, the seams right at the edges of that gap that we left open should remain intact. And then part of the process with the finishing touches, right around the time that we do the pleating, we'll close up that gap too. That's another time that our iron's gonna come in handy for us, is to get those. There we go. So now it is right side out. So there's a few different ways that we can do the pleats. One of these ways is to use a ruler and then some kind of water-soluble pen or chalk. You'll measure up 1 inch in pin. You'll do that 3 times, right? And then you'll go from the middle of each one, use that as your middle. And then from 1 inch to the other, press those without the pins, and that'll create a 1/2 inch pleat. So it's 1 inch, another 1/2 inch, another 1/2 inch. So from here to here is 1 inch. From here to here is 1 inch. To help you know where to fold, you can put one at the 1/2 inch point there as well. But you'll do that 3 times. So that's 1, this is 2, and then we'll do another one here. Another way to do the pleats is actually without doing that kind of measuring. All you have to do, and this is kind of a hack that people have found works well for them, is just fold your mask in half and then fold it in half again, and then give that a nice iron. And when you do, you'll have different points at which, if you iron it, they'll be more defined. But what that will do is it'll show you where the pleat is supposed to go. So you would just then fold down and pin. And one more pleat hack for you. So you can use a ruler for this if you've ever come to any of my programs, or I guess just in the past year or so, you may have received one of these hem gauges. This is super, sorry, that was my iron. Super handy for this. So you can either work, I generally do this kind of upside down. You can either do it from 2 inches from the top, as I said, or an inch from the bottom. And what that means is that we're going to line this up with the bottom there. That's an inch. I'm gonna actually turn this around so that I know where the inch mark is. So that's an inch, right? So what we're gonna do is then lift up the rest of the mask and fold over until we meet that 1/2 inch line. See? And when you do that, then you'll be able to press it into place. So this hot baby is gonna go right on top there. This is cardstock, so it is okay for me to iron it. If you have something similar that's made out of plastic, do not iron it. If you have something that's similar that is metal, be very careful. All right, so I'm gonna press and press and press. My iron isn't quite hot enough, but once it is, I'm gonna go ahead and pin these in place. When you do the pinning, make sure that you're getting through all layers. That's hot. All layers of it, right? So you might need some reinforcement. So one pin might not be quite enough, and it does end up looking a little bit squished, but that's okay for now. We just want to make sure that it's 1/2 inch. So we have one done here. We're going to do the same thing 2 more times. So you're going to start the 1 inch here at that last one where you left off, and then you'll do that whole thing again where you go up to 1/2 inch and press. Alrighty, so we've got 3 pleats. You'll see this whole thing here is about 2 inches. So it's about 2 inches down. Not perfect, but hey, it's a mask. So all that we need to do now, these are the 3 pleats that we have, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3 1/2 inch pleats. And what that helps to do is to get a nice fit over the nose and mouth, all the way down to just past the chin. So I'm gonna keep them kind of squished down with my hand. We call that hand pressing. Ow, geez. Okay, so now I'm going to just keep pressing it from this side, and then I'll flip it over and press / iron from the other side as well. And what that'll do is will give us nice straight lines, and it'll keep the pleats from wanting to unravel, which is kind of an issue when it comes to finally sewing them. They have a tendency to unravel as you sew. So I'm just going to pleat the heck out of these guys. Let's turn them over, and you see already they kind of, it's like an accordion, they kind of just want to come undone. That's okay. We're just going to push them back together and do the back side. Careful, because obviously it's an iron. It is hot. And what you can do too is when you're ironing and ironing and ironing, you can actually leave the other side of the pleats still pinned in place and work on them right before sewing them. You see how I keep having to push it back? You're gonna have to do that up until you get them under the machine, and even then you're going to have to kind of keep them scrunched together, so keep that in mind. You'll want to keep these ones in place until you sew across and then get here, and then you can take them out. We'll make it 2 different stitches, so you're gonna do a stitch that goes like an L that way, and then we'll come up this way and do that side. But what that means essentially is that we are pinning and pressing the sides of our pleats separately. That's going to make it way easier when we finally get it under that machine. So we've got one side done. I've gone ahead and pressed this quite a bit. As you can see, I took out the pins and now I'm kind of just holding it all together with my fingers. So what we're going to do now is tightly, you want to keep it kind of scrunched up, go ahead and put it under the machine, and you'll just kind of do an edge stitch as far over to the side as possible. Let's see. So we're going to go ahead and sew down, straight down. And I'm keeping my fingers here to keep the pleats in place, keep them from unfolding, kind of forcing them. As soon as we get to the side, we'll spin it around and sew it back the same way in order to reinforce the stitch. You can reverse stitch here, but I didn't trust myself to get it straight, so I just flipped it. Go over those a few times, because when you stretch them out, as you can see, the fabric may tug at the seams a little bit. You're also gonna go over several layers of fabric, so it's really a good idea to reinforce your stitches. We'll do the same along the other two sides, and if you hadn't noticed, I tied up the straps to keep them out of the way. Remember, these aren't passing any straight seam testing, so do the best you can. If you want to make it a competition with your family, go for it, whatever. So we'll snip all of the little pieces of thread, clean it up a little, and then the last step, which is optional, is to give it another set of stitches around all sides. So again, this is optional, but if you do this, you'll just have to be careful when sewing the bottom stitch that you don't accidentally sew down the bottommost pleat. So it'll be like a rectangle within a rectangle. And then voila, you should be done. And here is our finished product. You can see how it ties in the back, fits under the chin here, and goes up through the nose, all because of these nice pleats. So, thanks for joining me. I hope to see you next time. And please don't forget to like this video if you had a good time, and subscribe to the library's YouTube channel for more content. Thanks, bye.